So today we have Pedro Santa Clara. And Pedro, I want to once again thank you for an opportunity to interview you.
No, thank you.
About Lisboa 42. So I've heard so much about Lisboa 42, and we know that it's a program that that's popularly known for really producing excellence around coding and technology. You mind just telling us a little bit about how 42Lisboa emerged here in Lisbon?
Sure. So we started about 2 years ago. So this is a software development school. It's a high-level coding school, if you want. And it's been surprisingly successful. I think we had high hopes, but they've been vastly exceeded. In these last couple of years, we've had more than 30,000 candidates, and you know, so much in fact that this summer we just launched the second 42 school in Porto, which is the second largest city in Portugal. And this is a school that is different in a lot of dimensions. You know, first one, it's a school that's very inclusive, that really wants to give a second chance to some very talented people who, for a variety of reasons, didn't have the chance to go to university. And in that sense, it's tuition-free. It's totally funded by philanthropy, by a number of companies and individuals who support us. But it's also pedagogically very innovative. This is a school where there are no classes and no teachers. Yet students are physically present at school, and there's a vast pedagogical team that's continuously updating a learning platform that works essentially like a big social game that leads students through a sequence of challenges, and then it's up to them to look up all the knowledge that's required to solve each of these challenges. And they do that by researching online, and all the knowledge is freely available out there, but also with a lot of peer-to-peer work. So the sequence is always, you get a challenge, you scratch your head because you have no clue what it is about, then you go look it up, discuss with your colleagues. Some of these projects may take 1 or 2 weeks, others may take 3 or 4 months, some are individual, some are group projects. But when they're finished, they submit the code, the piece of code to the platform, which then randomly selects 3 colleagues who get a grading sheet and have to book a time with you, sit next to you, and will evaluate you. And this is a very interesting part of the process because all the students here are simultaneously students and teachers. They have to explain what they've done, how they've done it, why they've done it that way. And essentially through this process, they not only get a much deeper understanding of technology, because we learn much more when we're motivated by a project that we want to solve, but also they develop a lot of so-called soft skills, from initiative to resilience to complex problem solving to creativity to collaboration to communication. To what really fascinated me about 42 was this aspect of really using technology to obtain a better pedagogy. And I think that's been the crucial aspect of the crucial reason why the school has been so successful internationally in the last few years, and here too.
That's great. Now, I find the whole kind of 42 network to be a very unique model. But first, I just want to go back to the admissions process, and if we can go a little bit more into detail about that, because the way the students and who's attracted to the school as well.
So I think that's a crucial part. This is a very elitist school in the sense of merit, of achievement, not necessarily of where you come from. And anybody can apply as long as you're 18 of age or you finish 12th grade, just because we don't want to compete with mandatory schooling in the country. And then you start by going through a bunch of online tests, which are essentially logical games that are actually fun, but do a big part of the selection. And afterwards, if you pass that, you go to the piscine, which is the French name for swimming pool, which is a 26-day long boot camp in which they learn to program in C, already using the learning approach of the school. And so this is crucial because we end up selecting students based on their performance on the very type of work that the school does. So when you're admitted, there's no surprises and you know what you're going into. In the whole process, the fact that the school is gratuitous, that it's open 24/7, that you can work in the program at your own pace, makes it attractive to a lot of people. So we have not only the high school graduates who come here, but also a lot of current university students who are unhappy with their current experience and move here. We have also a bunch of a third group of professionals of economists and engineers and lawyers and architects and medical doctors who come to the school because they want to do projects in the area of technology, and they do that. And the last group, which is perhaps the most surprising, are people who usually for economic reasons had to stop studying at the end of high school and see here a second opportunity. And we have, airline pilots, an army officer, a musician, a pastry chef, a cocktail waitress, a personal trainer, a bunch of people of diverse professions who actually are very, very talented and hardworking and find here a second chance.
Well, it's interesting because when you allow for me to go out and choose any of the students to speak to, I just kind of closed my eyes and pointed to two very interesting people. And one was someone who left college, exactly what you said, and found this model a little bit more interesting, more challenging, more intriguing. Then the other student was someone who was leaving their industry and moving into this sector here. How would you say kind of the students that come here? Is it mainly young people, or is it people who are making these type of changes?
They're roughly equally divided in the four groups I mentioned. And this thing that I did to you, I do to any visitor to the school. I always tell them, pick a student and let's go talk to him or her. And the amazing thing is that it always works. You'll always find an interesting student to talk to.
It did work, and what was also most interesting was that they explained the curriculum process probably better than what I'm going to ask you about the curriculum, because they were in action and they had this very beautiful visual chart that really, visual design that really shows them kind of where they're going in their learning process. Can you talk a little bit about, even though they did a great job with me, but we want to share with
Sure. Well, I'll do my best. So essentially, the curriculum is split into two parts. There's the Common Core, which on average takes about 1.5 years to complete and has 9 levels, in which students will have the opportunity to work in pretty much every single area of programming. They'll do projects in algorithms or data analytics or networks or security or game development or mobile apps. You know, they'll touch upon each of these areas. And after that, which, by the way, in France is already corresponds to an undergraduate bachelor's degree. After that, they do a 6-month internship at a company working in coding. And then some of them will come back to the school to do the specialization bit. And that takes another 1.5 years on average to complete. And they can choose to specialize in any area that they want, you know, from operating systems to machine learning to games, robotics, mobility, you know, the works.
What I found interesting in speaking with them was also that based on what they want to specialize in, they can actually access the 42 network and go from here in Lisbon to another site to actually study in an area of interest with.
Right. Yeah. So 42, the network now has 46 campuses around the world. You know, from Tokyo to Quebec, from São Paulo to Finland to, you know, so there are a number of 42 schools around the world, and they're all connected using Slack. So not only there's a lot of interaction among peers who are physically present here, but they can all, and in fact they do, all chat at any time with students anywhere in the world. So if you're here at 4 a.m. and you have a difficult problem, you can just type it in, and there's always someone in South Korea that will answer your question promptly or something.
That's pretty incredible.
So that works well. And of course, also, you know, this school is sponsored around the world by a number of companies, you know, like we were chatting about 42 Wolfsburg,
Yes.
which is completely funded by Volkswagen, who wanted to have a coding school in its town because they understand the future of the automotive industry is much more software than hardware.
Yeah, Ford calls itself a software company now.
Well, it's coming too.
Yes.
Or, you know, Telefonica, the phone company that sponsors all the schools in Spain and one in Brazil. And this interaction with the industry is very close, and they're of course looking into recruiting our graduates, but it also works to the point, you know, they always force us to be at the frontier of industry applications, of what really matters to them in the training of our students. And so, you know, this is a very unique case. I've been a professor for 35 years, you know, we also chatted about it. I did my career at UCLA, but I've never seen any university like these anywhere.
And you were mentioning earlier that you're finding that 42 is actually literally ranking among some of the top.
Well, in a number of rankings recently, 42 shows up in the top 10 alongside, you know, schools like Stanford or Carnegie Mellon or MIT, which again is unheard of. This is a school that's only 12 years old, so it's pretty amazing.
So what is offered in terms of a recognition of completion? Is it a certificate? What type of kind of recognized completion?
So we give them a certificate, which is, you know, first off and most importantly recognized by industries.
Sure.
So you know, the big tech companies in the world know well what they can expect from our graduates, but that now it's starting to be sort of officially recognized, if you want. In France, it's the core curriculum is equivalent to a bachelor's degree, and then the specialization to a master's degree. But education is changing in many ways, and one of which that I find very interesting is that the need for certification is going down.
Yeah.
Already, you look at the big tech companies, and they've developed an ability to recruit and actually measure the skills and the competencies of people. So they don't much need the rubber stamp of an external entity to certify that, you know, this person has completed our course of studies. And I think this is going to become more and more prevalent. You know, what matters is what your capabilities are, not so much the degrees that you have.
Absolutely. What I'm finding is that, well, let me ask you, so a lot of different companies like Google and Facebook, they are offering, you know, their own curriculum that kind of verifies someone's capabilities. Do your students have an opportunity to pick those up along the way, kind of in parallel with the curriculum, or is that just something that they'll eventually kind of?
I think they will. I mean, essentially, what this school does, you know, besides getting a sort of very high level of technical skills and ability to solve complex problems and work by themselves and in teams, I like to describe our school as they're really learning to learn, you know, as opposed to traditional education where you sit in classrooms all day long and then you have to study for exams and get evaluated at the end. Here, they're really developing this meta skill, you know, this most important skill of all, which is learning to learn. Because the whole practice of being given a challenge, researching, collaborating, trying to find a solution, sometimes failing and having to try again, evaluating others and being evaluated by others, really is this ability of learning to learn. And what we find is that our students who are recruited by the most sophisticated tech companies around, you know, what they all tell us is that, you know, these kids arrive, of course, they don't know the technology stack that we're using, but they'll pick it up super fast and they go with that.
Now, you know, being here in Lisbon, where right now, you know, you're undergoing a growth in the tech sector in terms of attracting digital nomads, I guess what they call them, or just technical talent. And there is an ambition around kind of growing the tech ecosystem here. How has 42 played into that ecosystem? Do you feel like you're playing a role in cultivating talent for a pipeline?
Yes. So this is actually a fairly recent, you know, 5 years old or something movement that I think can be very important to this country. You know, all these digital nomads, as you call them, or all these companies that are setting up their excellence centers here to work for companies abroad. You know, one of our supporters is Mercedes-Benz IO. This is the digital arm of Mercedes-Benz, and they decided to locate in Lisbon because they feel the need to attract talent from all around the world, and Germany isn't cool enough to be able to do so. You know, Michael Bloomberg, I think, had a sentence that I love when he was mayor of New York. He used to say that talent attracts capital more than the other way around, and nothing attracts talent like being cool. And I think Lisbon has a bit of that, you know, just like California, where you live and where I used to live. This is the west coast of Europe, you know, and there's lots of stuff, you know, from surfing to people who are pretty welcoming. It's very safe, you know, there's low crime, there's good infrastructure, you're part of the EU. good connections, good time zone even. There's a number of reasons why I think Lisbon and Portugal in general, Lisbon, Porto, the rest of the country is going to do well in this big sort of technological shuffle that's happening around the world.
Well, Richard Florida wrote the book, The Rise of the Creative Class, and what he said was most important was venue and places in which people would want to gather around as a hotbed. And so I think that Lisbon provides that opportunity.
It does, and to me it's fascinating because Lisbon was all of these and then some in the early 16th century when it really was the center of the world. And then this is the second time coming. So I hope this one stays. But you're right. I've never seen anything like this. My friends from California suddenly are calling me about moving to Portugal, and I'm surprised to say the least. But it's great, and I think it's going to make this a much better country to live in.
So a little bit about yourself. So can you just tell us a little bit about your background, because you did spend a chunk of time in California working with some of our best universities and decided to come back to Portugal for a project, and then landing here. You mind kind of taking us through that journey a little bit?
Sure. So I grew up here in Lisbon. I studied economics at the Nova School of Business and Economics. And then I did my PhD at INSEAD in France. And then got a job at UCLA. And I started out as an assistant professor, and then went through the associate to full professor career, if you want, and essentially writing papers and teaching classes in the MBA and going to conferences and all that stuff. And then, somewhat surprisingly, I guess, because the whole family was becoming pretty Californian at that time, we stayed there for 12 years. We decided, actually, I had a sabbatical. We decided to spend the sabbatical here in Portugal, and then I guess moved by inertia. We decided to stay here for many reasons, one of which was, I guess, this idea that I don't want to sound pretentious, but the idea that I could be more useful here than there.
Sure.
Of course, the American universities and the top universities in particular are this amazing magnet that attracts talent from around the world. And I did pretty well, but I was one out of many. Whereas here, my hope is that I can contribute a little bit more.
Great. And so you came to 42LIsboa, so you left.
So I actually know when I came back in 2008, I went to Nova, to this university, and then I call it a midlife crisis because it was a total change of life for me. I took on the project of developing a new campus for the school and doing a big fundraising campaign that funded it, and all hundreds of projects that transformed the school, which was something that it's more common in the U.S. Where fundraising is established and so on. But here was very innovative.
It's tough work.
Well, but here it was a big splash, I think, and also surprisingly, I enjoyed that, and that project was done with a very small team of incredible, super dedicated young people.
Sure.
Who had been my students, and after a couple of years working for consultancies and so on, joined in the project, and we're now partners in these, and we're doing 42 and we're doing a couple other projects in the area of education. So it's been great fun.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about this building and how it became, this is a beautiful building and it serves as kind of a hub here for a lot of different activities. Can you mind telling us a little bit about how it came about and just some of the activities that take place?
So 2 years ago, we were launching the school. We were getting pretty desperate because getting a large, wide open building in this area is, well, in Lisbon in general, it's very tough, but the pandemic came and we had a chance to rent this building, which is an old printing factory. It's sort of a mixture of an urban industrial building that's interesting, I think, in an also interesting part of town. And so we moved in, we opened the school, and now it really is sort of the headquarters of these various projects that we have going on, but also ends up to being a meeting place for a lot of people. Who we have events and chats and all sorts of conferences and concerts and all that going on. So it's a pretty lively place.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go down there before I get out of here and play some ping pong because I saw that table.
You go ahead.
And it's going to attract me. It's attracting me there. So one of the things that probably is the most compelling part of 42, besides the amazing curriculum and the outcomes, is the tuition arrangement and how it's set up, the cost aspect of it. Of course, during a time when the biggest challenges that a university or any type of post-secondary institution or organization have to deal with is around finance. How do you create a market model that attracts a range of students?
So here it's not a market model because this is totally based on philanthropy. So we essentially have a bunch of sponsors of the school, and this, it's tuition free for the students. But that is also possible because the cost is about a fifth of what traditional education costs per year per student. It's roughly 20% of what traditional schools cost. And at the same time, I really believe that this is a superior learning model. So it's one of those rare occasions when, and I really believe that we are seeing here the beginning of a big technological disruption of higher education, which really has never happened. I mean, you look at a university these days, it's not all that different from 11th century Bologna when the first university was created. I guess the printing press was a technological disruption, but that was long ago.
Sure.
And now, for a variety of reasons, I think the pandemic forced everybody to really look seriously at alternative models of education. You have new players, both the big tech companies are all looking at higher education as one of the last big industries that they can disrupt. There's also a huge number of ed tech startups. If you think about the pandemic, we basically locked at home all the entrepreneurs in the world, looking at their kids having dismal classes on Zoom. And you can imagine the thousands of people that came out of that experience saying, I can do much better than this. Yes, so you really are going to have a lot of different players and different learning models. The actual needs of education are different now. Just raw memorization is not that useful a skill anymore. You really need these skills that we were just discussing of problem solving and collaboration and all that. You really also need lifelong education, which is something that we've been hearing about for ages, but really universities are still geared to the old model of you study until you're like 23 or years old, and then you work until you're 75, and then you retire. And that doesn't make any sense. We really have to reskill or upskill millions of people over the next few years. And I don't think traditional universities are very adapted to that. So there's different needs, different players. I think we'll see a lot of experimenting. I just described the model of 42, but you can think about all the knowledge that exists, from the gaming industry to the social networks, to the entertainment industry. All these people know how to capture your attention. And it's about time that we bring that over to learning useful stuff. So I think we're seeing the beginning of a big disruption. My guess is that at the end we'll see a very different industry. We've seen other industries being disrupted by technology, and it's rarely the incumbents who come out ahead, essentially because they have too much to lose from change. So it's what you're going to see, I think, are a lot of different initiatives that will seem small at the beginning, that you may want to disregard because it's not, the Ivy League. But one day you'll wake up, a bit like Kodak or Blockbuster or whatever, and you look around and you see that the whole world has changed around you and you're not that relevant anymore.
Absolutely. I think, it reminds me of Michael Crow, excuse me, at ASU. And one of the things he said is that the biggest challenge is that every educational institution is looking to Harvardize their school. And really the great disruption is those entrepreneurs who understand that going in the opposite direction of trying to Harvardize will create a huge range of opportunities for how people want to learn, the different styles of learning, as well as how people see their own personal talent in the world, and the sense of self-agency with that as well.
And I couldn't agree more. I think actually it's interesting that you mentioned agency, because one of the biggest differences in 42 is that the agency lies in the student. The student must have the initiative and the responsibility of managing their own studies, as opposed to traditional education where you have an authority, a professor who tells you what you have to do tomorrow and next week and next month. And these has a huge impact. These really forces people to grow up and to be in charge. In that way, a very American model. And I think we need these, education. Education is kind of a funny industry because we all spent a ton of time in school. And for centuries, there's been a single model of education, so we don't even question it. We take it as education looks like this. If I ask you to draw a school, you'll draw a bunch of students looking at a teacher writing on the board. It doesn't have to be like that. Technology can help, but really, in the end, what really matters is pedagogy. And for more than a century, really since Jean Piaget or even earlier, we've known that sitting in a class, listening to a lecture is terrible. I mean, the retention rates of knowledge are of the order of 5 to 10%. If you look at it, it's really a waste of time for everybody. And at the same time, there's big dropouts, it's expensive, it's not inclusive. We really need to experiment with alternatives.
In the whole Carnegie Hour, that whole idea really kind of atomizes learning. You think that you need to take something here and take something there, and those things are not necessarily feeling connected and fluid, with your learning process. So I'm excited about it. I absolutely agree with you. I think that the future of education, starting with the models like Lisboa, 42, really gives students an opportunity to do what I call more of a non-linear mapping that is more aligned with not only who they are, but with their process of discovery.
You're right, and I'm obviously betting on that. I think the next decade is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah.
I'm very eager. Sometimes I wish I could fast forward to see what's going to happen. But it's going to be interesting also to see how traditional universities react to these. And it's going to be tough for them because it's a very regulated industry. It's also, universities are funny institutions with funny governance models. At the end of the day, most schools are a little bit like a cooperative of professors who are humans and don't want to change.
Right.
So there's going to be a lot of pushback from traditional universities, but I think it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun, and just like everything else in the creative destruction process, you're going to see some universities just fall by the wayside, and that may actually be the signal that creates a sense of urgency, because right now I don't think that there is a sense of urgency with universities, because especially the public ones have always felt inoculated against the market, and like you said, between the kind of the regulation and the culture, because the culture is
this may be the Kodak moment.
Yes.
Kodak was this amazing company, one of the best known brands around the world, huge knowledge base of chemistry, of marketing, of everything, and then it just went belly up in the space of 2 or 3 years, from where they least expected, cell phones. So,
and what's interesting about that is that they actually had the first digital camera.
Oh, of course.
So
no, they had
they wouldn't market it. They wouldn't market it against their own market share.
Exactly, because it's always a huge dilemma. You're a huge company, very successful. How are you going to suddenly make a huge bet on digital and say, forget about everything else, which is, by the way, 99% of what we are, and where the power lies, all the know-how lies, and universities are going to be faced with the same problem. It's like, I just described the process at 42, and I told you that this costs 20% of what traditional education costs. And I think is more effective. Now, this is a dilemma for a traditional university, but what can they do? Are they going to throw away all their teachers and say, well, let's move into these other model of learning? Well, I don't think so.
No, it's going to be interesting, because some of them are finding that hiring part-time professors, maybe, to me, that may be even a signal that them knowing that there's another model that needs to be in place. I don't know, we can kind of go on here because there's just a lot of interesting moving parts in education, but I want to thank you for
my pleasure.
The opportunity to talk with you, not only because of your vast experience, but because this is an amazing place, and having a chance to speak with your students is exciting.
You're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.